Hello horror hounds, welcome back to our look through the films of David Cronenberg. Last movie we talked about was The Dead Zone, his first adaptation of someone else's work, and his career evolves yet again into strange and new forms, this time, whisper it, the R word, remake. A remake of the 1958 classic The Fly starring Vincent Price, although if you wanted to be a little pedantic you could argue that no, this is just his second adaptation, another adaptation of George Langland's 1957 short story The Fly, on which both films are based. In truth, I think it's probably, aptly enough, a fusion of the two, an adaptemake if you like. Whatever it is the glorious, harrowing The Fly.
I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.
Received wisdom is that The Fly is the film that finally broke David Cronenberg into the mainstream. And that's true to an extent. He's never sort of maintained his position as a mainstream movie director. And I'd even argue with The Fly, he didn't seek out the mainstream. The mainstream finally came to him. But I don't think he ever really changed his approach one iota. Don't get me wrong. As a director, he was always going out to try and make successful films. I mean, who doesn't? But I don't think he waters down any of his mores or obsessions with The Fly in order to appeal to a broader audience. The audience came to him. After expressing his obsessions in their purest form in Videodrome, you can see over his next few films that he's clearly refining things, distilling them down. The Dead Zone was a huge step towards that goal, but perhaps it wrong-footed his hardcore fans who were hoping for more in the vein of Videodrome or Rabid. When you watch his films one after the other in order, you can see though that The Dead Zone is an enormous stepping stone towards The Fly. With The Fly, I think he hits the absolute sweet spot between his extreme visual metaphors and thematic obsessions, whilst crafting a much more approachable and human story as a delivery system for his more outlandish instincts. This is not a cynical grab for commercial success. I think that was always coming, but The Fly still incorporates an exegesis of disease played out on the battlefield of the human body, jaw-dropping visual metaphor through envelope-pushing effects and shock imagery, and interpersonal drama. It's just that every strand of these whole hum at their own perfect frequency, a level of quality where each complements the other. Cronenberg's script didn't come from nowhere. He adapted an existing script by Charles Edward Pogue, which chimed with him so much he agreed to direct the project if he could perform a rewrite. Despite extensive rewriting of Pogue's script, Cronenberg insisted that he and Pogue shared screenplay credit. He felt that he couldn't have come to his script without Pogue's foundation. In rewriting an earlier draft of the script, Cronenberg made it a point to keep Seth Brundle as articulate as possible for as long as possible, as opposed to Pogue's draft, in which Pogue's hero loses his ability to speak about 2/3 of the way through the script. This key change is everything for the film. It keeps Gina Davis and Jeff Goldblum talking. It keeps them communicating. It keeps their relationship at the exact heart of this heartbreaking movie. Keeping Seth Brundle articulate gives voice, possibly for the first time, to the disease aspect of Cronenberg's work. Not since Lynn Lowry's character in Shivers, where she has the monologue about the dream she had about all flesh being erotic, even old flesh. Not since then has the disease portion of Cronenberg's equation had a voice. And Seth Brundle becomes its poster child. a figure through which to articulate all of his ideas of flesh, disease, mutation, death. We finally break through past the nebulous and undefined notion of Videodrome's new flesh to a point where the flesh has dialogue. You only know society's straight line about the flesh. You can't penetrate beyond society's sick, grey fear of the flesh. And I'm not just talking about sex and penetration. I'm talking about penetration beyond the veil of the flesh, a deep, penetrating dive into the plasma pool. I cannot do line readings as well as Jeff Goldblum. There are two secret stealth weapons that Cronenberg employs alongside his amazing visual effects artists. They are Jeff Goldblum and they are Gina Davis. Two actors so full of life, so expressive, so on top of their game, so goddamn sexy that you love them. You love them falling in love with each other. You buy it all the way through, and that human beating heart at the centre of this film takes you from the cold opening cute meat all the way through to believing that this Brundle pod fly pod fusion thing still has an element of Seth Brundle in it. That's the only way the ending can work. If Gina Davis sells you on this being the horrible final form of her dying lover, and the powerful performance of Jeff Goldblum carrying through into now something that is purely effects, latex and puppetry, but your mind wants to see a spark of Jeff Goldblum in it. I rewatched it last night and I cannot talk enough about how perfect these two leads are in it, and how I had forgotten, as a 20-something gorehound who was in it for the effects and the gore and the extremity, and really saw this as a powerhouse of body horror and visual effects, which it is. Oscar winning, rightly, by the way. Dial the clock on a few years, put a few more miles on, and the human story. And I talked about this in my review of The Dead Zone as well, not to say, and again, I'm going to say this again, I'm not intending to patronise younger viewers of this film. You can watch it, you can love it, you can get it. It's yours. When you've put a few more miles on, and as I said in The Dead Zone, when you've built up a few more regrets, when you've had a few more loves and a few more losses, this relationship that runs through it, this undercurrent between them, plays out so real, so well, that the tragedy, the real tragedy of them, this time round brought me to tears. Gina Davis is the captain of that ship. In my head, Jeff Goldblum, the arm wrestling, the walking on the wall, pulling his fingernails off, the teeth coming off, the corrosive vomit. And I'm not taking any light off Jeff Goldblum's performance, which is amazing, the little twitches he does. I don't think anyone else, once you see Jeff Goldblum as Seth Brundle, try mentally casting anyone else. It is not going to happen. But Gina Davis is the captain of this ship, and I was surprised upon rewatch to realise she's the focus of the story. She's the centre of the story. She's smart. She's independent. She's a fully realised character. The minefield that she has to weave, you can actually strip out all of the sci-fi and all of the mutation elements. You can even strip out the telepods. This would still stand alone as a powerful human drama about a couple who fall in love. One of them gets ill or and starts to die, starts to change. You could even see it as an addiction if you wanted to. If you wanted to take the disease aspect out of it completely, one of the pair becomes an addict and the addiction begins to take over and the person changes. And the path she has to lead through sexual harassment at the workplace, the man she's fallen in love with dying, an unplanned and unwanted pregnancy, all the way through with a dignity and a truth to her performance that this time round, when she cries, I cry with her. All the way through to, and it's very quick at the end, but a little meditation on euthanasia as well, what she's asked to do, what Seth, the last vestigial remnant of Seth, asks her to do at the end of that film is, it's almost unbearable. The end of The Fly, with the lovers joined again at the moment with one of them passing away, is a strange dark bookend to the end of The Dead Zone. In The Fly, the characters have their moment, and their moment passes. In The Dead Zone, they never have their moment, and then in the film they get a chance to maybe grab a snatch of it. They're strange mirrors of one another, and we'll move on to Dead Ringers in what's likely to form in my head now his relationship triangle trilogy: The Dead Zone, The Fly, and Dead Ringers. But I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge how key, how central Gina Davis is in that film. On composing duties, we see the return of Howard Shore, a very welcome return. It provides a score that imbues the proceedings with a sense of the epic, the operatic, and mythic, whilst at the same time echoing the deep currents of emotion that are at play throughout. Once again, he takes a story that's big and makes it grand. And in previous videos about earlier Cronenberg films, we've touched upon his rejection of the Cartesian split, the split between mind and body. With The Fly, he finally finds the perfect story to really hammer home his point. Brundle is a man who, when we meet him, has promoted his mind far above and beyond his body. He doesn't even really consider his body, consider all of his suits that are all the same, so he doesn't have to worry about what to wear, what he looks like. His motion sickness that we're introduced to at the start of the movie. This is a man who's uncomfortable with his body. It's all about what's up here. His growing relationship with Ronnie, his physical intimacy with her, and then sleeping with her, awakens him to the living vitality of the flesh. And it's the flesh that his telepods don't understand. And he says, computers are stupid, they only know what you tell them. I don't understand the flesh, so I can't make the computer understand the flesh. And after that fateful teleportation, the tables are turned. His body starts to gain supremacy over his mind. It rebels, it changes, it outstrips his mind, and his mind loses, perhaps with the last spark of his mind in his final act asking for death. Cronenberg is once again championing the flesh and arguing that mind and body are not separate, but an entity where one is frustratingly reliant on the other. Both can break down, but divided, the edifice falls. In The Fly, Cronenberg has found the perfect story to champion the flesh, the physical, that the mind is not some separate entity trapped in this. This is us. We will break down, we will die, our bodies will fail us. This is something that we all must come to terms with individually. It's a particular and unique obsession of his that he plays out time and time again, and I think it reaches its apex with this absolutely masterful movie. A meditation still on the obsessions that drive him, that suddenly finds themselves to be enjoyable and palatable to a wide audience. Whoever would have thought watching Shivers that the crazy sex parasites guy would be able to get millions and millions and millions of people to come and listen to him wax, as Seth Brundle says, wax messianic about the flesh, disease, all within one of the most tragic love stories the 80s ever gifted us with. I talked years ago about The Fly 2, so I'm going to link in the description field below to me yammering on about The Fly 2, which I think is worth consideration on its own merits. I'll also link to some fairly yummy deleted scenes from the movie. All of these cut, I think, for very, very good reason, but really intriguing and probably worth your time if you haven't seen them and are a little obsessed with The Fly. The next movie for us on our roster, though, we'll see him reducing down again, refining, distilling, but keeping an awful lot of the thematic through lines from The Dead Zone through The Fly to his next movie. Hope you can join me for Dead Ringers.